Join the coven. I think I accidentally joined a cult. Part 3. A story written by the Globetrotter. My heart nearly ripped a hole through my chest as I pulled into the parking lot of David's warehouse. The lot was almost entirely empty, except for a single car parked by the front door. I pulled into a spot at the far end of the parking lot, taking a second to collect myself. David planned on showing Henry and I something today. At the time, I wasn't certain that I'd even be able to tell you what it was. I was afraid that I would never see the sun again, never see Lily again. In some ways, I honestly wish that had been the case. I stepped out of my car reluctantly, shutting the door behind me. I considered waiting for Henry to arrive before going inside. But what was the use in that? If David really was a threat, I doubted that Henry would be much help. I stepped inside, feeling that chilling blast of air once again. The warehouse was just as full of boxes as it had been, but today it was quiet. All I could hear was my footsteps and the AC units as I crossed the warehouse floor on my way to David's office. Just as he had the day before, David exited his office as I had reached the door. "Ah, Thomas," he said, shaking my hand. "You're early." I nodded, deciding that I'd play along, at least in the short term. "Of course, David. I'm really excited to see what you have to show us." David smiled, motioning me to follow. "Of course you are, Thomas," he said, walking towards one of the aisles near the front of the warehouse. I glanced to the front door as David turned into one of the aisles. Henry was still nowhere to be found. I looked back to David, who was now holding a box. I nodded towards the package. "Am I going to be delivering this?" David shook his head, stepping past me. "No, not at all. You're not going to be making any deliveries today," he said, walking back to his office. I felt my anxiety begin to rise. I clenched my hand into a fist as I followed David to his office. The man stepped inside, turning back to me as he held open the door. I hesitated before stepping forward, entering the office room. David's office was large. I mean, very large. In the center of the room sat a long black desk with a standard black office chair sitting behind it. The walls were lined with shelves of random knickknacks and books. A small door sat in the back of the room, likely leading to some kind of closet space. The one item that stood out to me was set up on the left wall of the room. A beautiful tapestry was hung up across the entirety of the wall, as if it had been custom made. There was an extensively intricate border design with giant black letters, spelling out a message across the center. "The Lord is our Father, and we are his children." I knew already that David had been religious, but something about the tapestry sent a chill down my spine. It just felt out of place for the setting. I turned to David, who looked almost proud of himself as I had stared at his tapestry. "Do you like it?" I looked back to the wall, nodding slowly. "It's certainly beautiful." "It is, Thomas," he said, sitting down in his office chair. "Take a seat," he offered, pointing to one of the chairs that sat in front of his own. It didn't take long for me to realize that his statement was in no way an offer. I sat myself down, avoiding eye contact for as long as I could. David spoke. "I'm sure you have questions about what's going to happen today." All I could do was nod for a few moments. I thought back to one of the questions one of you recommended I bring up to David. "Yes, actually, I do," I said, trailing off slightly. "Look, David, I know that something isn't as it seems here, okay? I don't really care. I need the money. I need to know that Lily will be safe." David raised an eyebrow. "Lily?" he asked. I frowned, confused for a moment. "My girlfriend?" David smiled. "You're going to have nothing to worry about, Thomas," he said, looking to his office door. I hadn't even heard it open. Henry stood in the doorway. "Good morning," he said, stepping inside. "Good morning, son," he said, standing. I stood up as well, looking to my friend. "I'm glad you can make it. It's about time to get started." I searched Henry's face for any signs of discomfort, and was happy to find some. We made eye contact for a brief moment, but broke as we heard the sound of a door opening. David stepped into the room near the back of his office, coming back out moments later, holding 2 black robes. "Put these on." Everything inside me froze then. Henry stepped forward, seemingly not sensing anything wrong. But I knew. I regretfully stepped up to David, taking the robes into my hands. I stared at it, noting the extreme lack of color. I looked to David, who was staring directly at me. "Put it on, Thomas." I'm not sure that I would have been physically able to not put it on. I slipped the black robe over my head, letting it rest over my entire body. It was oddly comforting, and was a perfect fit. It was like it had been made just for me. David returned to the room in the back. I took a moment to peer briefly inside, shocked to see a bed sitting against the back wall. David exited the room wearing his own robe. The robe was nearly identical to ours, save for dark red collars that wrapped around his neck and wrists. My impossible fears were seemingly coming true. Henry still seemed oblivious. "These are very comfortable, David." The man nodded, his eyes remaining on me the entire time. "Indeed, Henry. What do you think, Thomas?" I nodded, staring at the ground. Yeah, they're great, David." He smiled, stepping around his desk and heading for the office door. "Follow me." Henry and I followed closely behind David as he moved towards the back wall of the warehouse. My heart rate began to increase as David reached the mysterious gray door. David slipped a keycard from his robe pocket, placing it against the scanner that sat in the wall beside the door. A loud click could be heard behind the wall as David pulled open the door. The room behind the door was completely black. David began to descend as he stepped through the door, letting me know that there was a staircase in front of me. Henry followed first, stepping cautiously down the staircase. I stood in the doorway, looking down the stairs. A dim light could be seen at the bottom, past Henry and David. I looked over my shoulder, seeing two men enter the building. I stepped completely through the door, shutting it behind me. I descended rather quickly, catching up to the others as they made their way to the bottom of the staircase. There was no railing to hold on to, so I just slid my hands along the walls as we made our way down. We were at the bottom of the staircase before I would have liked to be. David led us down a dim hallway, candles, the only sort of light on either side of the path. If my brain hadn't already been concerned, it would have been now. David pushed open the wooden door that sat at the end of the hallway and stepped through, gesturing for Henry and I to follow him. Enter. I exhaled nervously as I followed Henry into the room. It was massive. I don't even know where to begin in describing it. The room was dim, like the hallway had been. Candles and lanterns remained the only sources of light. There were many tables and chairs set up, enough to hold nearly 100 people at least. The walls were lined with wooden doors, the contents of their respective rooms a mystery to me. Henry was amazed. What is this place? I turned to David. Is this some kind of underground bar? David laughed, seemingly amused. No, Thomas, it's so much more. I wanted to run, but I told myself that I was safer just playing along. At least for now. Please, tell me, David. I need to know. He looked to Henry and I, a smile across his face. There are some things I haven't told you about our family. Henry nodded, looking to me. I couldn't tell anymore if he was just trying to play along. What is it? David continued. Our organization is founded under the Lord. We serve him and make his presence on this earth known to those who lack the blessing of knowing. I felt like I was going to pass out. Henry didn't. Interesting. So this is some kind of church then? Like Christianity? David turned away, staring off into nothingness for a few moments. He turned back to Henry, his eyes burning. The Christian's God is no God of mine. Everything inside of me was telling me to run. Then who is your Lord, David? David looked as if he were ready to answer, but suddenly shook his head. Only those within the Lord's inner circle can be blessed to hear his name. I'm in a freaking cult! Henry nodded. Huh, he muttered, looking around. I forced my hands to stop shaking. David! David cut me off. This family has been together for hundreds of years, boys, and we'd like to expand the tree today. Henry and I stood in silence. What the hell was I supposed to say in a situation like this? Henry spoke up first. That is a big offer, David. It's not an offer, son, he said. It's a gift of the end to all of your suffering. I couldn't take it anymore. Can we discuss this first? David didn't appear to like that answer, but nodded after a few moments of silence. Choose wisely, children. I pulled Henry aside, whispering to him as we moved. What the hell is going on, man? Henry finally showed some signs of distress. This is freaking crazy. Is it a cult? I shrugged. I think it is, man. He looked around once more. I mean, we're probably just overreacting, right? I scoffed. Only those within the Lord's inner circle can be blessed to hear his name. Sounds like a freaking cult to me, Henry. Henry sighed, rubbing his chin. Well, what the hell are we supposed to do? Say no? He had a point. I rubbed my face. I knew Henry was right. There was no saying what could happen if I turned David down. And now he knew about Lily. I turned back to David. We made a decision. David looked back to us, a smile on his face. And I looked to Henry once more before speaking. We are interested. David's smile somehow became even larger. He stepped up to us, placing his hands on our shoulders. Welcome to the family. David let Henry and I explore the home, as he put it. The entire underground bunker was massive. Henry and I stood together, not far from where David had left us. This is unreal, he said, looking from door to door. I nodded, looking over my shoulder. What should we do? Do we call the police? Henry shook his head quickly, looking over his own shoulder. No, let's not do that. We don't even know if this is illegal. I groaned, looking around once more. Well, we won't know what to do from this point on if we don't look around some first. Henry grunted in agreement. Let's split up. Come find me if you find anything, he said, walking off to the other side of the room. I looked back to the massive wall of doors. My feet carried me to the back corner of the wall. I may as well go in order, right? The door in the back corner of the room had a black sign on the front, white letters spelling out the word closet. I pulled open the door, finding the closet to be as underwhelming as you probably imagined it would be. I shut the door, looking to the next. The sign read kitchen, my interest increasing. I pulled open the door, looking inside. It was completely dark. I stupidly fumbled around for a light switch and was shocked to actually find one. I flipped it on, the light filling the kitchen. It was a lot larger than I had originally imagined. This kitchen was more of something you'd see in a restaurant than you would in the basement of a warehouse. Why did some rooms have power, while the central area was lit entirely by fire? I shut off the lights and stepped back out, shutting the door. The room to this door's right read library, and the wall beyond it was barren for a long stretch of it. This room had to be large. I stepped inside, instantly awed by the size of the library. Bookshelves lined the wall in front of me, as well as every other wall for that matter. A large desk sat in the middle of the brick wall, a door in the wall behind it. I read the spines of several books on the shelves, expecting to be met with spell books and forbidden rituals, but was surprised to see that many of these books were just novels, fiction. I stepped behind the desk, the surface of which was covered with books and various papers. I pushed open the door behind it, peering inside. It was a simple room, a black couch against one wall. The other had an old box-shaped television with a VCR player sitting below it. Another door stood in the back of the room. This whole place was like a maze. Not wanting to enter the second room, that was certainly a closet, I stepped back out of the room and shut the door. I took a final look at the entirety of the library. A duo of armchairs sat in the back corner of the library. I smiled to myself then. This place honestly didn't seem that bad. I could see myself coming here to relax. My eyes caught sight of another door as I began to leave. I paused, staring at the door. I approached it, pulling it open. It was another closet. Metal shelves sat against the brick wall with cardboard boxes and miscellaneous books lining each shelf. I stepped inside, looking through a pile of books. Nothing interesting. I pulled a cardboard box from the shelf, ripping it open. Inside sat even more books. At the time, I was annoyed, but in hindsight, I'm not even sure what I was expecting to find. I pulled out a second box, pulling open the already ripped apart flaps. I frowned, looking into the box. Inside of the box sat a jumbled pile of VHS tapes. White masking tape was set on the face of each tape in the box. I smiled to myself, fumbling through the box. Each piece of tape had a different name written on it in black Sharpie. Michael, Tony, Anthony R., Warren. I picked up the tape, looking at the other side. It was blank. I knew that I probably shouldn't have, but I picked up the tape, pushed the box back where it was, and stepped out of the closet. My feet subconsciously carried me to the room behind the desk. I needed to watch this tape. I knelt beside the television, plugging it into the outlet in the wall behind it. I pushed the power button, instantly feeling the static electricity forming on the glass screen. I turned on the VCR, listening to the white noise the television was producing. I placed the VHS tape in the VCR and sat back, waiting for anything to happen. The static white noise continued to buzz as the VCR loaded my tape. I propped my hands out behind me, holding myself up as I waited. The screen suddenly changed, revealing shaky camera footage. The camera remained focused on the floor for a few moments before it spun, facing the man recording. It was him, the man I had seen outside of my apartment building. I was sure of it now. The man spoke in a deeper voice than I'd expected. May 15th, 2019. Warren, redacted. Ashley, redacted. I could feel my uneasiness return. The man spoke with such a calm, monotone voice that it was almost terrifying. The camera spun once again, and I could feel my stomach drop. A cute girl sat in a wooden chair, her hands and feet tied to the arms and legs of it. She didn't look much older than 18. "What is your name?" the man asked, the camera suddenly stabilizing. It had been likely placed on a tripod. The girl sniffled, staring at the ground. The man repeated himself. "What is your name?" The girl looked up, the makeup on her face running. Please." The man entered the frame, his palm making contact with the girl's face. "What is your name?" The girl began to cry harder now. Ashley," the man continued. "What did you want to say?" Ashley looked at the man again. "God, please, just let me go. I won't tell anyone." The man slapped the girl again, her yelp the only thing I could hear. "Say it!" the man yelled, threatening to hit her again. Ashley looked directly into the camera, directly into my eyes. I want to please Daddy. I want him to feel good. I felt as if I was going to be sick. Was this some sort of sick fetish pornography? If so, it felt horrifyingly real. "And how will you do it?" he asked, stepping out of the frame once more. The girl watched the man as he left. "By letting him watch me bleed." I physically couldn't move as the man reappeared in the frame, holding a knife in his hands. Ashley began to scream, rattling in the chair as the man approached. He stood behind the girl, placing the knife to her upper arm. A red gash appeared, and her screams increased in volume. I finally looked away, my face shoved into my palms. I listened to the girl scream as she was presumably mutilated on camera for someone else's sick fantasy. I couldn't take it. I squinted my eyes shut and held my hands to my ears, attempting to drown out the noise. Ashley's screams very suddenly stopped. I sat up slowly, expecting the sick film to be over. A large black man stood in front of the television, the cable in his hand. "You aren't supposed to be in here." I instantly recognized him as the man I had seen here just 2 days before. I held up my hands. I hadn't realized I had been crying. "Please, I had no idea. I promise I won't tell anyone about this." The man smiled. "It's all right, child. I forgive you." I stopped crying, rubbing my eyes. You what?" The man approached me, struggling to kneel beside me. "There is nothing for you to apologize over. They are not my tapes." I felt my sadness turn into rage. What the hell was that? The man sighed. "The family struggles to reach our goal, child. Without proper funding, we cannot make it there," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "We must make it there, whatever the cost." My anger continued to build. Even if that means selling videos of innocent girls being mutilated? The man frowned, looking over his shoulder. "You must keep your voice down, child. The founder is not as forgiving as I." I began to breathe, suddenly remembering where I was, who these people were. I had to calm down. I nodded, feeling disgusted in myself. "I'm sorry. I just wasn't expecting to see that." "I understand," the man said. I continued to nod, fear filling me. "Please, don't tell David about this." The man smiled. "Do not worry. Our Lord is a spirit of trickery and deceit. He is surely proud of you." I didn't think the situation could get any worse, but here I was. "Who are you, if you don't mind me asking?" I said, sitting up straight. "They call me the librarian," he said, making himself comfortable on the floor. "I take care of archiving all events in this family's history." I nodded, happy to finally receive some form of information about this horrid place. "And you just said something about a founder?" The librarian nodded. "Yes, the man you know of as David above ground goes by the name of Founder when he is in the home." I squeezed my eyes shut, just trying to comprehend everything. "Aren't there better ways to make money?" I asked, trying to avoid looking at the television. "And what do you mean when you talk about the goal?" The librarian sighed. "I'm not really supposed to tell you," he said, looking at the door of the room. "But I see something in you, child." I nodded, just ready to have some answers. The librarian spoke. "The family's ultimate goal in this realm is to meet the Lord. Generations have tried and failed, but this is the perfect time for one to join the family. The founder discovered a new way to meet the Lord." I followed along in complete awe of the brainwashing this man had gone through. How? The librarian hesitated before continuing. "The Lord demands 47 innocent sacrifices. Upon receiving the soul of the 47th, our Lord shall ascend to our realm and bring us back to the afterlife." I raised my eyebrows, unsure if I was hearing the man correctly. 47? The man nodded. "Yes, child. One sacrifice for every day the Lord was banished to the dark realm." He had lost me already. And you film these sacrifices to sell them? In order to fund the goal? The librarian smiled, pushing himself off the ground. "You learn fast, child." I nodded. "And how many sacrifices have we made already?" 46, he said, his smile growing wider. "Tomorrow is the day of salvation." My stomach had begun to churn. Tomorrow, these horrible people were going to kill another poor girl in hopes of meeting their God. I wasn't sure I wanted to be around when it happened. I stood, visibly shaking now. "Thank you, librarian, for trusting me with this knowledge," I said, feeling stupid. He smiled. "Trivial secrets will no longer matter in a day's time." I nodded, thanking him again before stepping past him and exiting through the door. I found Henry speaking to David in the central room of the basement. Henry had an odd look of horror in his eyes, but he seemed happy as well, presumably seeing that I was back. We spoke briefly to David before turning and leaving. He'd given us another $100 and told us to come back early the next day. I don't know why the man bothered giving us money, seeing as how he expected us all to be in the afterlife the next day. I had a long talk with Henry outside. I think I persuaded him into not coming back here tomorrow. If everything worked out, these freaks would be dead tomorrow anyways, and I wouldn't have to worry about them ever again. I didn't mention the sacrifices to Henry. I figured that I could spare him the details. He seemed a bit confused to hear that I didn't want to come back, almost disgusted in a way. But he eventually gave in and agreed to quit. I got home a few hours ago and talked to Lily for a while. I just needed to get my mind off all of these horrible things. This was all one horrible mistake. I should have never taken up the job offer. Something tells me this story isn't over, as much as I want to believe that I'll never have to go back to that place. I just know I'm being naive. Wish me luck. I feel like I'm going to be needing a lot of it.